in the cold, gleaming heart of the xenogalactic arena, where bioengineered gladiators and cybernetically augmented warriors clash for the entertainment of a million worlds, a new fighter was introduced. No plasma claus, no reactive carapace, no synaptic disruptors, just pale, vulnerable skin, unremarkable musculature, and two empty hands. The audience, a sea of chitin, scales, and light, hissed in derision. But one observer, a veteran analyst named Kvix of the Sarasong clan, felt a different emotion, a chilling, instinctive dread. As the gates rose, and the monstrosity known as a Gornax charged, she leaned forward, her multi-lensed ocular implant whirring as it focused on the human's calm, unblinking eyes. Just before the impact, her sensitive audio pickup caught it, a sound not from the human's throat, but from deep within its chest. A low, rhythmic thump-thump-thump. It wasn't a war cry. It was a biological metronome. And as the first spray of alien blood painted the sterile floor, Kvix realized with horrifying clarity, they hadn't sent a warrior to the arena. They had unleashed a predator in its most pure, unadulterated form, and the entire galaxy was about to learn the terrible, beautiful difference. The air in the observation spire was thick with the scent of ozoned coolant and distant, coppery blood. Hollow screens floated like ghostly lilies, each displaying a different angle of the arena's white, self-cleansing sands, now stained with vibrant purples and acidic greens. Kvix of the Sarasong clan ignored them all. Her primary attention was fixed on the raw, unfiltered feed from her personal drone, a discreet metallic beetle currently hovering just above the combatant's preparation cell. The human sat on a bare bench, its form seemingly pathetic under the harsh light. Designation: Subject 77 Alpha, Sam. No surname. The procurement report, which Kvix had memorized, was sparse. Found adrift in a derelict generation ship, the last of its crew, in a state of cryogenic suspension so primitive it was a miracle it functioned at all. The arena's Lord saw novelty. A baseline mammal, untouched by the universal standards of augmentation. A curiosity to be squashed for a crowd jaded by spectacle. Kvix had analyzed thousands of fighters. The hulking BR Val with their stone-like hides and hydraulic fists. The swift, venom-tipped Silthry. The telepathic, pain-projecting Mirkutty. She could predict their tactics, their fear thresholds, their breaking points. This human defied her models. Its biometrics, piped to her console, were a quiet anomaly. Resting heart rate, a steady 58 beats per minute. Cortisol levels, marginally elevated, consistent with alertness, not terror. Galvanic skin response, calm. It was as if the ambient screams of the arena, the roar of the crowd, the imminent promise of a brutal death, were nothing more than distant rainfall. Her auditory sensors, finer than any natural organ in the galaxy, picked up the minute sounds. The soft shush of calloused palms rubbing together. A slow, controlled exhalation. And beneath it, that relentless, rhythmic thudding from its thoracic cavity. Loop-doop, loop-doop. A sound of profound, efficient durability. Kvix's own dual hearts fluttered in a nervous syncopation against it. The announcement boomed across the arena, translated into 100 languages. Behold, a relic of a forgotten age. Flesh against fury. The human versus the Gornax. The crowd's reaction was a wave of dismissive chitters and mocking light flashes. The Gornax was a favorite, a six-limbed horror from the methane swamps of GRUNN, its body a mass of corded muscle covered in a thick, bony plating. Its face was a nightmare of grinding mandibles and for burning red ocular nodes. It wielded no weapon. Its forelimbs ended in scythe-like claws capable of shearing through battle-grade steel. It charged from its gate with a ground-shaking bellow, jets of flammable gas puffing from its spiracles in aggression. The human stood. It did not crouch into a combat stance known to any of the galactic archives. It simply rose, rolled its shoulders once, and walked forward. The dissonance was jarring. This was not the pacing of a trapped animal or the strut of a proud warrior. It was the purposeful, unhurried advance of something stepping into its own domain. The Gornax closed the distance, a mountain of rage and chitin. At the last possible moment, when every simulation in Kvix's mind predicted a dodge or a futile block, the human moved. It was not a flash of impossible speed, but a vector change of devastating efficiency. A slight pivot of the hips, a drop of the center of gravity. The scythe claw whistled past, missing the human's torso by millimeters. The human's left hand snapped out, not as a fist but as a grabbing, anchoring hook. It caught the Gornax's leading limb at the joint, where the plating was thinnest. Quick's implants zoomed in. The human's fingers, blunt and nail-less compared to claws, did not try to pierce. They dug, pressed, and twisted. A basic principle of leverage, her computer identified, but applied with a brutal, instinctive precision no machine could replicate. The Gornax roared, more in surprise than pain, and swung its other claw. The human was already moving inside the arc of the swing, its body so close to the monster's that they seemed to merge for an instant. Then came the sounds. Not the clash of metal or the crack of energy fire, but wet, organic sounds that silenced the crowd. A sickening pop as the human's elbow drove upwards into the Gornax's lower mandible joint. A muffled crunch as a foot stamped down on a forward ankle, not to break the bone, but to hyperextend the tendon. The human was a vortex of controlled, close-quarter violence. It used the Gornax's own mass and momentum against it, striking not at the strongest armor, but at the junctions, the gaps, the pressure points. The Gornax stumbled, off balance, its rage turning to confusion. The human gave it no time. As the beast reeled, the human jumped, not high, but with a ferocious spring. One hand gripped a horn-like protrusion on the Gornax's head for stability. The other, fingers curled into a peculiar, rigid shape, shot forward in 3 short, piston-like strikes to the same spot on the Gornax's neck, just below the cranial carapace. Thwack! 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 The Gornax froze. Its 4 red eyes dimmed. Then, with a sound like a falling tree, it collapsed onto the white sand, twitching once before lying still. A pool of viscous, amber fluid began to spread beneath its head. Silence. Absolute, disbelieving silence filled the colossal arena. The kill had taken less than 20 seconds. Kvix realized she had stopped breathing. Her drone feed showed the human stepping back from the corpse. It was breathing harder now, a fine sheen of sweat on its skin, but its face was eerily placid. It looked down at its own right hand, the knuckles split and bleeding from the final strikes, then casually wiped them on its thigh. Then, it did something that would haunt Kvix forever. It looked up, not at the cheering galleries, for there were none yet, but directly at the observation windows, as if it could sense her scrutiny across the distance and through the polarized transparent steel. Its eyes, a pale, watery blue, held no triumph, no bloodlust, only a deep, unsettling assessment. A whisper escaped Kvix's mandibles, a private thought amplified and recorded by her own suite. It didn't fight the monster. It dismantled it, like a mechanic disabling a machine. This was not combat. This was biology. The whisper, captured and autologged by her system, was a seed. But in the arena, the silence broke. Not into cheers, but into a deafening, chaotic uproar of confusion, outrage, and a thrilling, terrible fascination. The lords of the arena had their novelty, and Kvix had a terrifying mystery wrapped in pale, bleeding skin. The human's victory was ruled a fluke. A lucky strike to a rare neurological weakness in the Gornax. The arena's broadcasters declared, their synthesized voices struggling to impose narrative on chaos. The odds of the next fight were astronomical. Kvix knew better. She spent every waking moment between matches studying the playback, her analytical suite running at full capacity. She isolated the micro-expressions on the human's face, the slight narrowing of the eyes as it calculated distance, the almost imperceptible flare of its nostrils, sampling the air, tracking the Gornax's methane emissions, she hypothesized. She mapped its movement, a fractal pattern of efficiency that wasted zero energy. Every motion served either defense, attack, or repositioning. It was a language of violence, and Kvix was a frantic, terrified student. Her whisper from the first fight, it dismantled it, had become an obsessive mantra. She cross-referenced ancient, fragmented databases, pulling records of pre-contact Terra. She found myths, legends, and scattered pieces of something called combat science. Terms like anatomy, kinesiology, pressure points, and a dozen different schools with unpronounceable names. Krav Maga, System of Bejiquin. They were pieces of a puzzle, describing a philosophy where the human body itself was the weapon, and the enemy's body was the battlefield to be conquered. Her superiors in the Saro Song clan, controllers of information across 3 spiral arms, were uninterested. A fascinating animal, Her overseer had clicked dismissively. Its novelty will wear off, and the arena will consume it. Continue your market analysis on the VAR-SK celebrity duels. But Kvix couldn't. The human's calm eyes haunted her. She used her clearance to dig deeper into the procurement file. The generation ship's logs were corrupted, but she recovered snippets. The ship's purpose, not exploration, but exodus. A last, desperate flight from a cataclysm. The crew roster listed specialists, engineers, biologists, hydroponicists, and a final cryptic entry for Sam Ryder designation, contingency. The next fight was announced. The human would face the Thar twins, a pair of symbiotic telepaths who used psychic dissonance to shatter an opponent's nervous system before moving in for the physical kill. A favorite for their psychological horror. The crowd, now morbidly curious, buzzed with anticipation. Could the human's luck hold against an enemy that attacked the mind? Kvix was in her spire, her sensors directly patched into the arena's bioscanners focused on the human. As the twins emerged, their forms shimmering with psychic energy, she watched the human's vitals. Heart rate, 62. A slight increase. The psychic wave, invisible but devastating to most species, hit. Kvix saw the expected neural spike on the scanner, and then nothing. The human's brainwave patterns, chaotic for a nanosecond, suddenly smoothed into a strange, rhythmic pattern. Theta waves, deep and resonant, akin to a state of meditation or focus flow. The twins hesitated, their psychic link faltering in confusion. They had brushed against a consciousness that was not disordered by their assault, but one that had instinctively regulated it. The human didn't scream or clutch its head. It took the moment of their hesitation to close the distance. It fought differently this time. The twins were frail, their strength in their linked minds. The human strikes were sharp, precise blows to the nerve clusters at the base of their slender necks, delivered with the knife edge of its hand. They fell quickly, their psychic shriek cutting off into silence. The victory was even faster, more clinical. The arena was now fully, dangerously captivated. The human was an impossibility. Kvix, poring over the new data, made another connection. The human's recovery rate was off the charts. Its split knuckle from the first fight were already scarred over. Its metabolism was a furnace, processing nutrients with terrifying efficiency. She found references to a thing called the sympathetic adrenal system, a buried relic of an evolutionary past where survival meant being able to fight, flee, and then recover immediately for the next threat. This wasn't just a fighter. It was a perpetual survival engine. Her clandestine research triggered an alert. The arena's lords summoned her. In their opulent chamber, floating above the bloodied sands, they were a council of different species, united by greed. Analyst Kvix, the lead lord, a being of crystalline light, pulsed. Your interest in the specimen is noted. Your insights could be profitable. They wanted her to help design the human's next challenge. To craft a narrative, an opponent that would truly test it to maximize betting revenue and ratings. They saw a puzzle to be solved for profit. Kvix saw a truth that could shatter their world. She nodded, playing the obedient servant. It responds to primal threat, she said, her voice modulated to hide her revulsion. Not just strength, but cunning. An opponent that is also a hunter. They liked that. They selected the YRGOL Stalker, a creature that was almost invisible when still, capable of phasing slightly out of sync with reality, a living blade that hunted by surprise. It was a creature that had killed 100 arena champions before they even knew it was there. As Kvix left the chamber, a new data packet, encrypted and buried, arrived on her private node. It was from a low-level tech in a biolab. Attached were images of the human cell, taken from a maintenance drone. The human was not sleeping or pacing. It was performing a series of slow, deliberate movements, a flowing dance of balance and controlled tension. In a corner of the cell, it had used its own rations to create a crude, lumpy model in the dirt. Kvix enhanced the image. It was a recognizable, if simplistic, map of the arena's layout. The human wasn't just waiting to fight. It was training. It was planning. Her whisper this time was a shuddering realization, spoken to the empty corridor. You are not a specimen reacting to stimuli. You are a soldier assessing a battlefield. The fight with the stalker was no longer a spectacle. In Kvix's mind, it became the next move in a silent, deadly campaign whose objectives she could not yet fathom. The air before the third fight crackled with a different energy. The dismissive jeers were gone, replaced by a tense, hungry silence. Bets were no longer on if the human would die, but how it would kill. Kvix, her role now twisted into that of a reluctant game maker, monitored the arena's environmental systems. At her suggestion, the light levels had been dimmed to near twilight, and the climate controls introduced a slow, drifting mist, optimal conditions for the YRGOL stalker. The human stood in the center of the vast space, a lone, pale figure in the gloom. It had been given a token weapon this time, a short, dull-edged blade, a concession to fairness, a cruel joke by the lords. The human held it loosely, testing its weight. Kvix's enhanced auditory feed caught the faintest of sound from its cell before the match, a repetitive scrape-scrape. It had been sharpening the blade's edge against the cell's stone floor. The gates did not open with a roar. The YRGOL entered the arena unseen. One moment the sands were empty, the next there was a distortion, a heat-haze shimmer near the eastern wall. The crowd held its breath. The stalker was a legend of silent death. Kvix watched the human's vitals. Heart rate, 55. It was dropping. Its breathing became shallow, almost undetectable. It closed its eyes. A gasp rippled through the spectators. Was it giving up? Succumbing to fear? Kvix understood. It was removing a useless sense. In the visual noise of the mist and shadows, sight was a liability. The human's head tilted slightly. It was listening. Not just with its ears, Kvix realized, her sensors locking onto the subtle tension in its neck and jaw. It was feeling for vibrations through the soles of its feet, reading the minute disturbances in the air current against its skin. The stalker moved, a phantom glide. The human's eyes snapped open, not towards the distortion, but to a point 3 meters to its left. It had predicted the path, not tracked the creature. It began to move, not with aggressive strides, but with a slow, deliberate pacing that mirrored a predatory stalk itself. It was turning the hunt around. The arena became a chessboard of silence and suggestion. The stalker would phase, appearing for a fraction of a second with a clawed limb lashing out. The human was never there. It would have already shifted, its own blade flicking out to slice empty air where the stalker's body would have been if it followed through. It was fighting a ghost by anticipating the mind of the ghost. Kvix's analysis, sweet, flashed with warnings. The stalker's phasing technology created a unique energy signature, a brief localized gravitational anomaly. Her systems could detect it. Could the human? No, it had no sensors, but it was reacting as if it did. Then she saw it. The human wasn't tracking the stalker. It was hurting it. Its movements, seemingly random, were subtly altering the stalker's approach vectors, using its own reflexive attacks to guide it toward a section of the wall where the mist pooled thickly around a broken, dormant cleaning outlet. A trap of environmental design. The stalker, frustrated, committed. It phased directly behind the human, its form solidifying completely for the kill strike. At that exact moment, the human dropped into a crouch and spun, not with a blade, but with a fistful of sand and grit scooped from the floor. It threw the debris not at the stalker's face, but at the space in front of it. The fine particles hung in the damp air, outlining the stalker's form like a chalk drawing for a critical second. The human didn't need more. The dull blade became a flash of silver. It didn't stab. It drew a single, precise line across the stalker's throat, where its phased biological form momentarily stabilized. The creature clutched at the wound, a gurgling, shocked sound escaping it before it collapsed, its invisibility failing as it died. The human stood, chest finally, heaving in deep, purposeful breaths. It looked at the blade, now stained with iridescent blood, and then tossed it aside with a clatter that echoed in the silent arena. The message was clear. I didn't need it. The uproar that followed was seismic. This was beyond luck, beyond skill. This was preternatural. The human was now a phenomenon. Kvix's console was flooded with directives from her clan and the arena lords. Demand for analysis, for prediction, for exploitation skyrocketed. But Kvix was elsewhere. In the aftermath, she had accessed the security feed of a human cell. It sat against the wall, its eyes closed again. But its hands were moving, not in a combat form, but in a repetitive, deliberate pattern. One hand would slowly extend, fingers curling in a specific sequence, then retract. It was exercising, but also communicating. A code? She ran the pattern against every known linguistic or symbolic database. No match. Then, on a whim, she ran it against the most archaic, bedrock binary systems in the galactic archive. The simple on-off, open-close logic of primitive computers. The pattern translated. A simple, looping message. Survive. Observe. Wait. Ice flooded Kvik's circulatory fluid. This was not an animal reacting. This was not just a soldier. This was a thinking, planning entity operating under a core directive. The contingency from the ship's log. Her earlier whispers, her private realizations, now coalesced into a terrifying certainty. She wasn't watching a fight for survival. She was witnessing the execution of a long-prepared protocol. The arena, with all its layers of security, its arrogant lords, its millions of watching eyes, was not a prison for the human. It was a showcase, a demonstration. And she, Kvix of the Sorrow Song, the galaxy's premier analyst, was the chosen witness. The question that now consumed her, drowning out the clamor of the galaxy, was a simple, dreadful one. A demonstration for whom? The human had become a cultural singularity. Its image, pale, scarred, calm, was projected on skyscrapers across galactic capitals. Debates raged. Was it a genetically engineered relic? A conscious weapon from a lost war? Philosophical discourses were penned on the nature of baseline strength. The arena's profits multiplied, and with them, the Lord's ambition and their fear. They could not simply let it fight forever. The crowd would grow accustomed. They needed a finale, a triumph so definitive it would cement the human's legend before it could evolve into something inconvenient. They chose the Zenith, a multi-stage combat trial reserved for retiring champions, a gauntlet so brutal no one had ever survived all 3 tiers. Kvix was ordered to design the final tier. The Lords wanted spectacle, a grand, tragic death that would be talked about for generations. She nodded, her mandibles stiff with concealed purpose. She had begun to see the outlines of the human protocol. It learned, it adapted, it used the enemy's strengths against them. To defeat it, the arena would have to present a threat it could not learn from, could not adapt to. So, she proposed the opposite. She proposed a mirror. For the first 2 tiers, the human faced engineered horrors, a bioacid spitter, then a swarm of razor-winged drones. It dispatched them with a chilling, weary efficiency. It used the acid to melt the drone hive, showing a ruthless understanding of the arena's own systems. It was conserving energy, Kvix noted, treating the fights as maintenance tasks. Then came her 3rd tier. The gates opened, and a figure walked out. It was humanoid, clad in sleek, adaptive armor. It carried no visible weapon. The crowd murmured in confusion. This was no monster. A synthesized voice announced. The pinnacle of combat synthesis. The Golem Series 9, loaded with the cumulative combat data of 10,000 arena deaths. It has studied every move of the human. It predicts, it adapts, it cannot be surprised. The Golem stood opposite the human. It was a perfect, soulless counter. A machine designed to do what the human did, analyze and exploit weakness. For the first time, Kvix saw a flicker in the human's calm. Not fear, but a profound, focused intensity. Its heart rate spiked to 90, then settled into a hard, rapid rhythm of total engagement. The golem moved first, a blur of optimized motion. It perfectly mimicked the human's own disarming technique from the first fight. The human evaded, but the golem's other hand was already striking at the predicted dodge point. A glancing blow slammed into the human's ribs. A sickening crack echoed. The crowd roared. This was it. The machine was superior. The human rolled with the impact, coming up with a limp, one arm pressed to its side. Broken ribs, Kvix scanners confirmed. The golem advanced, relentless. It fought with the human's own stolen style, but perfected, without fatigue or error. The human was forced into pure defense, blocking, parrying, retreating. It was a ghost fighting its own better shadow. Kvix watched, her dual hearts pounding. Had she miscalculated? Had she, in her desire to understand the human's limits, engineered its destruction? The human was driven back towards a dead zone of the arena wall. The golem pressed, a flawless, beautiful engine of violence. It launched a series of strikes aimed to cripple limbs, the exact sequence the human had used on the Star twins. The human blocked them, but each impact jarred its broken ribs, pain etching its face. Then, as the golem committed to a final, crushing elbow strike to the human's sternum, the human did something illogical. It didn't block or dodge. It stepped into the blow, taking the full force on its already injured side. The sound was horrific, but in doing so, it trapped the golem's arm against its body with its own. For a split second, the golem was locked, its predictive algorithms scrambling. The scenario, self-inflicted damage to gain control, was not in its database of efficient combat. In that second, the human's free hand shot up, not in a fist. The fingers were rigid but held in a strange, almost gentle curve. It struck the golem not on its armored body, but on the side of its sleek head, targeting the sensory cluster with a series of sharp, percussive taps. Top, 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 top. The golem staggered. The taps weren't to damage, but to overload. A burst of chaotic, meaningless data fed directly into its primary sensors. Its movement stuttered. The human twisted, using the last of its leverage to slam the golem, face first, into the arena wall. Not once, but repeatedly with a desperate, brutal rhythm. On the third impact, the armor cracked. On the fifth, a shower of sparks erupted. The human let go, and the golem slid to the ground, a twitching ruin. The human stood over it, swaying, blood dripping from its mouth and side. The silence was absolute. It had won by doing the one thing a perfect machine could not predict. Choosing to suffer, to break its own body, to introduce chaos into a system of pure order. It then turned its bloody face towards the observation spire. Its eyes found HFY's window again. Through pain and exhaustion, its gaze was clearer than ever. It gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, and HFY understood. The mirror had not been to kill the human. It had been the final test. The human had just proven it could defeat the galaxy's best imitation of itself. The demonstration was complete. Her console lit up with a priority alert from the arena's central AI. It was a security breach report, flagged from the human cell. During the fight, its embedded biomonitor had broadcast a powerful, compressed data burst on an archaic frequency. The burst had piggybacked on the arena's own galactic relay, aimed at a specific vector in deep space. The AI had only just deciphered the carrier wave. The data payload itself was unreadable, but the destination coordinates were clear. They pointed beyond the galactic rim, into the silent, empty black, to a place where no known star, no colony, no ship's log had ever recorded anything at all. The whisper that left HFY was not of realization, but of culmination, a truth so vast it shrunk the roaring arena to insignificance. The fight was never the message, she breathed to the silent, recording air. The fight was the beacon. You were calling home. The aftermath was not celebration, but a quiet, seismic shift. The human, Sam, was taken not to a cell, but to the arena's medical wing, a place of sterile efficiency that now felt like a shrine. The lords, terrified and avaricious in equal measure, declared it the ultimate champion, a title empty of meaning yet heavy with unspoken dread. They spoke of parades, of a tour of the core worlds, of immortalizing it in crystal. But their eyes, in HFY's analysis, held the frantic gleam of those trying to cage a storm. Sam lay on the med bed, its torso encased in a cellular regenerator. Its eyes were closed, but HFY, watching from a secure terminal, knew it was not asleep. Its vital signs displayed the same controlled, rhythmic patterns of deep focus. It was waiting. HFY acted, using the chaos of the security breach and her elevated status. She isolated the archaic frequency Sam had used. It was not a complex code, but a simple, repeating pulse, a lighthouse signal. Using the Sorrow Song clan's deepest astronomical archives, she ran a new analysis on the destination coordinates. Not a static point in space, but a locus, a region that moved according to ancient, slow stellar drifts. A rendezvous point. The data painted a picture, fragmentary and terrifying. The generation ship wasn't fleeing a natural cataclysm. It was fleeing a loss. A war so old its records were dust. And Sam, the contingency, was not a survivor. It was a deployable asset, a scout, a sleeper. Its purpose, to reach a place of high traffic and visibility, to assess galactic threat levels, and, if possible, to survive and demonstrate capability. The arena had provided the perfect stage for the final act, a live-fire demonstration of human combat efficacy against a wide array of galactic species, broadcast to the entire civilized galaxy. And the beacon was the all-clear, or perhaps the come and see. The lords, in their panic, decided on a preemptive strike. They could not control the narrative anymore, so they would end it. They announced a victory gala within the secured arena complex. Sam would be presented, then retired with honor, a euphemism the galaxy understood for permanent, quiet removal. They would dissect it, study it, and own its secrets. Fix knew she was out of time. On the night of the gala, the arena's underbelly was thrumming with nervous energy. The elite of 1,000 species mingled in the central gallery, their laughter brittle. Sam stood on a raised dais, clad in a simple tunic, its injuries healed, its face a mask of passive observation. It looked less like a guest of honor and more like a surveyor. Fix bypassed security protocols, her analyst codes granting her unseen access. She moved through the maintenance corridors, her heart a drumbeat in her chest. She reached a service hatch overlooking the dais. She wasn't sure why she was here. To warn it? To join it? To bear witness to the end? The lead lord raised a crystalline glass to propose the retirement. At that moment, every light in the arena complex died. Not a flicker, but an absolute, swallowing blackness. A pulse of electromagnetic energy washed through the building, silencing comms, disabling weapons, and dropping the gravity neutralizers. Panic erupted, a symphony of shrieks and clattering in the dark. Fix's ocular implants adjusted to low light. She saw Sam move. It dropped from the dais, flowing through the chaos of stumbling, confused dignitaries like a ghost. It wasn't attacking. It was navigating with unerring purpose towards the arena's main reactor conduit, a heavily shielded but centralized power source. Then, from above, through the arena's open dome, came a new light. Not the familiar glow of the city planet, but a hard, cold pinprick that grew with impossible speed. It resolved into a shape, blacker than the black sky, absorbing starlight. It was small, maybe frigate-sized, but its design was like nothing in the galactic registry. No gleaming hui, no graceful curves. It was angular, utilitarian, and radiated a silence that felt more threatening than any roar. It settled over the arena like a stone falling into water without a sound. A single, narrow beam of white light lanced down from the ship, piercing the dome and striking the center of the arena's sands, exactly where Sam had fought its first fight. From the beam emerged 3 figures. They were human, but they made Sam look like a sketch of the idea. They were clad in form-fitting, matte black environment suits, their faces obscured by helmets that showed only dark visors. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace that made Sam's efficiency seem almost artisanal. One carried a compact, blocky device. The other 2 held weapons that were simply blunt, menacing shapes. The crowd froze. This was not an arena spectacle. This was an insertion. Sam reached the reactor conduit access panel. It didn't force it. It placed its palm on a biometric scanner, which flashed green, a clearance implanted during its medical treatment. The panel slid open. The human with the device stepped forward, attached it to the reactor's core linkage, and activated it. A deep, subsonic hum filled the arena. The lead lord, finding his voice, shouted a command to his hidden guards. Energy bolts from emergency backup sidearms lanced towards the newcomers. The 2 armored humans didn't dodge. The bolts struck their suits and dissipated harmlessly. One of them turned its helmeted head towards the guards. A small aperture opened on its forearm. There was no flash, no sound. The guards simply collapsed. The device on the reactor hummed louder. Then a voice issued from it, and from the ship above. It was a human voice, speaking in perfectly modulated galactic common. It was calm, clear, and carried the weight of continents. Attention! This system is now under the protective custody of United Earth Expeditionary Forces. The individual known as Sam Ryder is a sovereign citizen of Earth. His mission is complete. The demonstration of hostile intent by local authorities has been noted. A non-interference perimeter is now established. Compliance is mandatory. The device wasn't a weapon. It was a field projector generating a dampening field over the entire star system. No ships could leave. No weapons of mass effect could fire. Humanity hadn't come with a fleet. They had come with a lock. Sam walked to the center of the light beam to join its kin. It paused and looked up directly at Fix's hiding place in the service hatch. It raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a gesture of acknowledgement, of thanks. The armored humans fell back into the beam with Sam, and they were gone. The beam vanished. The black ship above accelerated upwards, and was swallowed by the night in an eye blink. The lights returned. The dampening field remained. The arena was left in a silence more profound than any that had ever filled it. The Lord stood amidst the terrified elite, their power, their spectacle, their entire reality rendered petty and obsolete. Kvix slowly sank back into the shadows of the corridor. Her work was done. The story was not. The whisper she released was not recorded, for she had disconnected all her implants. It was for her alone, the first true historian of a new age. You didn't watch a monster fight, she said to the memory of a pale, bloody figure on white sand. You watched a messenger deliver a letter, and the letter said, "We are here. We have always been here. And you are not alone in the dark anymore." The galaxy had learned of humanity not through diplomacy or discovery, but through the oldest, most primal language of all, consequence. And the lesson had just begun.